И сейчас я предоставляю слово ее превосходительству госпоже Фатиме Kyari Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to present the following statement on behalf of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Moussa Mohammed Faki, who could not join us today. Let me also start by congratulating you on assuming the presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of April, and thank you for inviting the African Union to speak at this crucial time. I wish to also thank the Secretary General, SRSG Perthez, Ms. Joyce Msuwa, for their briefings, and also look forward to the briefing by the IGAD Special Envoy, Mr. Ismail Weiss. Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council, the role of the African Union to support the Sudanese national actors resulted in the August 2019 Transitional Agreement. This agreement permitted relative stability for 2 years and included the signing in 2020 of the Juba Peace Agreement with Sudanese armed groups. During this time, Sudan was also removed from the US list of state sponsors of terrorism, and we saw Sudan's return to the international community with key decisions on debt relief and economic and development assistance following decades of sanctions against the country, thus laying the ground for a stable and prosperous Sudan. The October 2021 coup, however, brought the civilian transition to an end and led to the suspension by the African Union Peace and Security Council of Sudan from participating in all of the activities of the Union. It should be recalled that the chairperson traveled to Sudan 5 times since the October coup to engage with the military and civilian actors to impress upon them the urgency to reach an agreement for a return of a civilian-led government and finalize the transition period by holding general elections. Since the descent into violence that began on the 14th of April this year, the African Union issued a statement calling for an urgent de-escalation, a ceasefire, and a return to the negotiating table. For its part, the AU Peace and Security Council convened an emergency meeting to consider the worrying developments in Sudan, during which the Council, inter alia, demanded the Sudanese parties to embrace a peaceful solution and dialogue. They also tasked the AUC chairperson to use his good offices in engaging the belligerents. It was also in this spirit that the chairperson convened and chaired an urgent global high-level meeting on the 20th of April, where he invited the United Nations Secretary General, the regional body IGAD, the Arab League, the European Union, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the A3, Sudan's neighboring countries, as well as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Norway. Participants, amongst others, agreed on the following conclusions. They condemned the violence and called for the immediate humanitarian ceasefire to allow the observance of the Eid al-Fitr, with a view to pave the way for a more permanent ceasefire. They demanded that the belligerents establish humanitarian corridors and allow for unhindered humanitarian access to address the urgent and immediate needs of the population, including the rehabilitation of and civilian use of critical basic infrastructure, particularly water and electricity services, respect the safety of diplomatic and humanitarian personnel, and reopen critical transport infrastructure like the Khartoum International Airport. Participants also called for the urgent resumption of the political process through dialogue and negotiation towards the establishment of an inclusive civilian-led government. They strongly rejected any forms of external interference. Participants also committed to coordinate, collaborate, and harmonize their common action. And in this regard, they requested the trilateral mechanism under the leadership of the chairperson of the African Union Commission be enlarged to the League of Arab States, the EU, the Troika, and bilateral actors to immediately engage the leadership of the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF and other stakeholders. The enlarged mechanism is expected to meet in the coming days to discuss immediate practical steps regarding issues related to an envisaged cessation of hostilities, which is linked to humanitarian access, both being priority actions before any others can follow. All this is underpinned by the African Union's guiding principles, namely that no military action can solve this crisis, and that any political process must be a political process which has registered recently important milestones, and that any political process must be an inclusive Sudanese-owned process. We also reiterate our strong rejection of any foreign interference in what is already a dangerous crisis for Sudan, the region, and the continent, and millions of innocent civilians affected. Madam President, I also wish to recall that the 20th April meeting unanimously mandated the African Union and the United Nations to coordinate international action on Sudan with the objective of finding an urgent end to the violence and the destabilization of Sudan and the broader region. There is a real risk of regional conflagration and indeed internationalizing this conflict. All the ingredients are there. We have seen this happen 11 years ago in Libya, which is on the Sudan's northern border, consequences of which the entire region is still affected with today. There is therefore a real need for the international community to speak with one voice and in coordination with the African Union. I must also underline the importance of the role of IGAD. This is crucial for bringing the Sudanese parties to the table and encourage peaceful dialogue. In this regard, the African Union looks forward to the visit to be undertaken by the IGAD high-level mediation mission to Sudan and marks its readiness to assist in facilitating this visit, which will be an important contribution to the ongoing efforts deployed by the entire international community. From a broader outlook, the AU continues to express its deep concern over the consequences that the current dangerous situation could have on the overall political process, which registered recently important milestones despite the difficulties it was facing. It is essential for the Sudanese parties not to lose sight of the central objective of forming a broad-based civilian-led government headed by a prime minister appointed by consensus to steer the transition to a new democratic dispensation in Sudan. We must take full advantage of the strategic partnership between our two organizations, the African Union and the UN, as well as regional actors to further strengthen coordination on the various aspects in order to optimize and maximize the efficiency of this support and its positive impact. Finally, Madam President, I reiterate the call of the UN Secretary General's call for the belligerents to de-escalate, to fully respect and uphold the ceasefire in order to facilitate efforts being deployed. And we must not lose sight of those who are most affected by this spiraling conflict, the people of Sudan. We must remain engaged. The AU will fully continue monitoring closely the situation and keeping this August Council duly informed. I thank you for your attention.
Я благодарю ее превосходительство госпожу Mohammed за ее заявление.